Hello, everybody, and welcome to this latest in the ValuesJam guest series sessions. And Liz, it's brilliant to have you here. So first off, why don't you introduce yourself and the great work that you do?
Yeah, great to be speaking with you today, Alan. Uh, I'm Liz. I am currently running a training organization called the Sophrology Academy. Now, sophrology, not very well known and a bit of a mouthful of a word. What it is, it's bottom line, uniquely structured mind-body practice for self-development, enhanced performance, and overall health and well-being. Much better known in French-speaking countries in Europe, where it's been around for more than 60 years now, and in use in fields such as education and business and hospitals and sports and performing arts all over the place, where they use sophrology for lots of different things, but really tapping into the power of the mind-body connection for all those reasons. So relatively new to the UK, and we're part of establishing it here. And at the Sophrology Academy, we train people in professional skills to become sophrology practitioners and to take the method out to others.
Okay, great. Do I remember reading an article that talked about sophrology being kind of supercharged mindfulness or something like that?
Oh, yes, something like that. I think they called it was in The Guardian, and I think they called it sophrology is the young dynamic cousin of mindfulness or something like that. Yeah. So where that comes from is, yes, we have lots of overlaps with mindfulness, and certainly draw on mindfulness in our practices, but we also draw on other practices like yoga, so where we bring a more body-focused dynamic element to the exercises. So very much more focused in the body, on simple exercises that are easy to incorporate into daily life and don't require sort of sitting for long periods of time in silence and so on. Yeah.
And if people are watching or listening to this and they want to know more about this, where can they find out more information?
Well, our website is probably the best place in the first instance. So it's sophrologyacademy.co.uk, SOPHRO Academy. And then you can follow us on Facebook and so on. We have little practices of the week and other interesting bits and pieces if people are interested.
Okay, so let's get into our values jam. So I've got the deck here, and
Right.
first thing for us to do is to identify the card that we're going to play with. So how many times shall I cut the deck?
Let's do it 3 times.
So 3 cuts, which means that I'll have 4 piles.
Okay.
And so would you like me to choose pile 1, 2, 3, or 4?
3.
3. And so we've got 2, 4, 6, 8, 12 cards. So the number between 1 and 12.
Well, let's stick with 3.
3. Ooh. So
entrepreneurship. Interesting.
Yeah. So we both have a little bit of experience of this. So the first question is this: what does entrepreneurship mean? And what does it look, feel, and sound like?
So I suppose there are lots of links for me with innovation and with I'm going to say a whole lot of other values here, I can tell, other values that are linked to this value of entrepreneurship, like courage, and yes, fresh thinking, solving new problems or old problems in a new way. Definitely entrepreneurship, the element of courage, but also listening. And what are the other elements I would say of entrepreneurship? Innovation, courage, listening. Let me pause there.
Okay, so I've got I can relate to most of the ones that you've said.
Yeah.
I think similar to yours, I would add freedom. So I think of entrepreneurship as being able to kind of do what you want to do more than you're able to do that perhaps when you're in a structured corporate environment somehow. Although that's maybe the romantic version of it rather than the reality of it. And then I've got a more negative word, actually. So loneliness comes forward for me.
Right. Yeah.
Where you are kind of, the buck really does stop with you in entrepreneurship. Whereas perhaps in a corporate environment, you've got other people that you can kind of lean on more. I don't know why, but the IT thing comes to mind. when you have an IT problem and you're an entrepreneur, it's like it's sorted, rather than call the vice president of IT to help you.
Yes. Yeah.
And what about the metaphor element of that question, Liz? What does entrepreneurship look like, sound like?
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the image I had when we started talking about it, was a person on their own. So I suppose it does link a little bit to your what you said there of isolation, but it's that the sense of also the breadth of having to solve the IT problem, as well as post the letters, or I don't know, do everything from A to Z, right, as well as the strategic plan and the finances and everything. So there's the sense of a person standing with their arms out, actually, in my mind right now, but standing tall. So because this is the risk taking and the courageous element of it. Is unafraid, the courage, unafraid to stand up and be counted, to take responsibility. So standing up above a crowd, in a way, standing out, something like that.
And what about sound like? Any sounds come to mind?
Not really, actually. What other?
I think I've got a sound of like a busy whirring machine kind of thing.
Right.
This kind of it's going, going. And I love your picture of the person with their arms out, because it's that is the breadth, but then there's also the depth as well. Yes. Because not only do you have to be able to turn your hand to lots and lots of different things, but like you said, you need to be able to do the strategy down to posting the letter stuff as well. So it's this breadth and depth.
Yes.
And then feel like, I think the feeling that comes through to me about entrepreneurship is liberation, actually. Because for all of those challenges that we've talked about, it's your choice. So I think it's very much more liberating, actually, than I used to think before. When I was in the corporate world, I always said I'm not good enough to go and do something on my own, and I thought that I wasn't. I was too risk averse as well to be able to go and do something.
Yeah.
So let's ask another question then, and this is about when the opposite of what we've been talking about, I guess. So where have you noticed a lack of entrepreneurship?
Yeah, as you say, I think in large organizations, right? And because entrepreneurship is also something that's quite a fashionable thing right now for larger corporates to be promoting and training their managers and leaders in an entrepreneurial mindset. So what is an entrepreneurial mindset? And to me, that's that's really about spotting the opportunities. So I'm not quite answering your question now, but maybe we'll come round to it. Something about spotting opportunities, and maybe that's also the image of the sort of person, you know, standing up above the crowd, because there's an ability to be able to see perhaps more. And so the lack of entrepreneurship is when I can only see my little bit, you know, in my box.
Yeah.
You know, and I do things the way I've always done them, because that's the way we do things around here. And I'm not questioning, I'm not looking beyond, you know, for spotting the opportunities, or listening to pick up the opportunities. So a lack of entrepreneurship is bureaucracy, or, you know, things like that, I would say.
And can you think of any specific example, either an incident or an organization or a part of an organization, where you would say, yeah, that was a definite lack of entrepreneurship?
I'm always useless at finding the specific examples.
I'm just thinking of one actually, which was, it's both an example of a lack of entrepreneurship and then the light to make a decision that was entrepreneurial. So this was, I worked for Whitbread actually, when Whitbread had quite a diverse portfolio of different companies, and part of the employee benefits scheme was that you had a discount in other Whitbread businesses. But the way that this was tracked, I think it was through vouchers or something. And so there was a whole industry created in accounts to be able to track all of this stuff and keep records and blah, blah. So that for me was a lack of entrepreneurship, because exactly like you described, that was bureaucracy gone mad. Spending a load of money on tracking this wooden dollars, because it was just all the own company's money. And actually, I don't know who decided this, but they decided to just stop doing it. So not to bother tracking it. And I don't know if there were ever any repercussions of doing that, but I remember thinking, oh, that's really brave, because rather than, you know, going down that corporate mindset route of we must dot every I and cross every T and make sure that we know, they just said it's costing us more than it's worth, so stop.
Yeah. Brilliant. That's a great example. Yeah, it's a great example.
And then the other area that comes to mind, I think, is the public sector. Whether that's fair or not, I'm not sure. But it just feels some of the time, when I've either touched the public sector with work or as a customer, it seems to feel really stodgy sometimes. I don't know whether you've any experience similar.
Yeah, actually, also what that makes me think of is some of my recent interactions with banks too.
Okay.
You know, because one of the things with entrepreneurship is that you know, when it's just you make sure that your processes work, because, you know, it's a real reflection of, you know, of your own competence and integrity and so on. And I've just found recently in several processes of trying to apply for different, you know, bank products and so on, websites just not working. You know, and it says, you know, upload the thing over here, pushing this button, and then the button doesn't exist, or, you know, things going into black holes, or, you know, things not making sense in the process on the screen. It's just confusing. And I find myself asking often to myself, has anybody actually used their own website on this process? Because it just doesn't make any sense, you know. And it's that kind of thing where, you know, some person way down the chain has done the development, and then you've got the customer service people somewhere else, you know, trying to deal with all the problems, you know, in the help desk of people calling in to say, I don't understand how I'm supposed to do this. It doesn't work, you know. Yeah, and those two pieces just don't talk to each other. Yeah.
And I think there might be at least two contributory factors to that. One might be mindset, and the other is scale. So, you know, when you've got a massive organization, it is sometimes trickier, isn't it, to kind of organize your resources so that they're manageable. But then if you do that, how do you avoid them being disconnected, like you just described, and the customer service people not having any communication with, let's say, the website development people? Yeah, and how to get those two talking to each other so that, like you've described, you don't have a situation where a customer is going, well, who the bloody hell's used this? You know, no, who has it been tested?
Yeah.
And I'm just going off topic, so I'm going to resist going off topic.
Yeah, because there's something in entrepreneurship which is really about solving a customer's problem, isn't it? It feels like, you know, really understanding a customer's problem, and then, you know, with an innovative idea that will solve that problem. And I think that, you know, all these kinds of, you know, these services often that we have to deal with on a day-to-day basis feel so not like that.
Well, that was what was kind of in my head, because what I was kind of grappling with was, how is it that these organizations have got so much resource, and yet things that are often quite basic are not right? You know, they're not working. Whereas it's the other way around if we're taking entrepreneurship to apply to much smaller businesses, where you can't afford for basic things not to be working. And secondly, you're kind of strapped for resource. And so you're a lot more focused on getting things to be value for money, if you like.
Yes.
Not allow things to be kind of just wasted.
Exactly.
Do you think go on?
No, I was thinking, you know, I'm still building on our image. And there's something about the tall, you know, tall person with arms outstretched, but then there's something, you know, very much in the heart center that's building for me here in the image, you know, of having this sort of customer, or, you know, the problem that I'm solving, the pain that I'm setting out to ameliorate, or, you know, suffering or pain or customer need or something, is very much a focus at the heart of the entrepreneur, and that, along with the sort of courage to take a risk to try it out.
I like the way that image is building, and so I'm going to add to it a bit about our figure there. Is in bare feet.
Oh yes.
And their feet are firmly planted on the ground. There's something about an entrepreneur kind of being really connected, rather than some of those larger organizations where there's a risk that it becomes detached.
Yes.
Okay, so what about from a positive point of view, when have you experienced entrepreneurship? You know, what's the best example to you of entrepreneurship?
Oh, there are, you know, there's so many clever things that people think of, and you know, it's often these things to, you know, that they come up to solve their own, you know, something they spot for themselves as a gap and a need, and so on, and then cleverly take out to market. Of course, now that we're having this conversation, none of those specific examples come to mind. So you might need to talk a little bit so that that can come, but, you know,
I'm happy to do that. So I've got two. One is kind of from a bit ago, and then one is quite modern. So when people talk about entrepreneurship, Richard Branson comes to mind, and for a couple of reasons. So he had one of his very early Virgin Records stores in my hometown. And you could go there and you could put the headphones on and you could choose an album that you wanted to listen to. But then I remember how he said that he wanted to be regarded as the challenger by British Airways and caused them sleepless nights. And I really enjoyed that kind of small business challenging the big guys.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other bit about him, which I'm less kind of impressed by, but absolutely it happened. He seemed to have products in so many different areas, whether it was, I think he did Coca-Cola for a while, certainly got into the weddings market and really stretched the brand. I'm not sure how successful all of those were, but that's certainly entrepreneurial, that whole Branson thing. That prompt anything for you? Not yet.
Not yet.
The other one then is Uber.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to read a bit from this book about Uber, because it really summarizes how they disrupted the market. And if you think back, to when it used to be taxis and black cabs in London, it's so different now. But
Yes.
this is what's brought to mind. So I don't know if you knew this, but Uber, the first test of Uber was in 2010.
Gosh, yes, that's a long time ago.
Well,
wow.
13 years, right? So when you bear in mind that they used three cars,
wow,
that's what the test was. By 2020, they had 4 million drivers in 400 cities taking 75 million journeys.
Incredible growth. Yeah.
Just any small business starting up, I think that's an example of, it's an extreme example of what can happen in a relatively short period of time.
Yeah, so a short period of time to grow like that. But I suppose what I was thinking of when you said 2010 is I suppose I only got to know Uber more recently, and the whole thing of actually starting small, and when nobody knows you, but then the possibility of really disrupting the market like that. Amazing. Gosh, that took courage. Yeah.
And then there's, again, in ValuesJam, this sometimes happens. So what we found is that kind of thoughts come into your mind that are seemingly unrelated, and I don't know where this is going to go, but I remember seeing a story about a little girl in America, I think it was, who set up a lemonade stall, and it was to get money to buy somebody something. It was like an act of goodwill that prompted her to do this. But it was a beautiful story because of why she, it wasn't the lemonade that actually was the thing.
Yeah.
It was people saying, oh, this little girl has done this off her own back. How much courage has she shown to set it all up? And it's for a good cause. And so, yes, we're going to buy a lemonade. So there's something about what you're actually buying when you're buying entrepreneurship. And maybe it goes back to that Richard Branson challenging the big guy again. It's more than the product. It's more personal, maybe. Is that it? I don't know.
Could be. And again, well, I think that's the thing of connecting with the customer, isn't it? Connecting with the people that you're that you're serving, and that connection being more personal and more maybe specific or unique and valuable in that way. Yeah,
and often the entrepreneur is still the figurehead, actually, aren't they? So you actually can associate with the individual that's responsible for the business, rather than in a larger organization, maybe more long-standing, where the original people have moved on. So there's not so much of a personal connection. So maybe it is this thing that you've said about a stronger personal connection with entrepreneurial type businesses.
Yes.
Now, in ValuesJam, there's an opportunity for you to ask your own question. So I'm going to invite you to play with this. Ask your own question about entrepreneurship. So beginning with who, what, where, when, why, or how.
The value of entrepreneurship. All right, so we've spoken of sort of, you've mentioned some who's, haven't you? So we sort of done a bit of that. I suppose, what about how? How do we or what is the value of entrepreneurship to the world, and how is actually, I think it might be a ValuesJam question, but I want to ask, how is it good for the world?
That is a good question, and yes, it is a question. So do you want to answer your own question first, or do you want me to have a go?
Yeah, you have a go. I asked the question.
Okay. So how does it improve the world? I think that it gives the opportunity for fulfillment, for people to be able to be inspired to do something, go and do it, and realize how it feels when it goes well.
Yeah.
And the other thing that comes to mind immediately, I think, is this opposite of bureaucracy. So it's something to do with agility and fleet of foot and being able to adapt to changing circumstances. So those two things come to mind first. So fulfillment and agility.
Yeah, yeah.
What about you?
Yeah, and I think improving lives. I mean, and again, the specific examples, of course, don't come to mind. But I think there's a lot of entrepreneurship that's also happened in the medical world, in developing countries and so on, in being able to, solve some of the problems with health, public health, and so on, in very innovative, low cost ways. So there's sort of improving lives in efficient ways that I think entrepreneurship can bring. Yeah.
So let's I'm going to go to the dark side of entrepreneurship a bit now then. So South Africa connection here. So we were on holiday and we had a hire vehicle and we needed to meet some people for the next part of our holiday. And so I was driving quite fast. The road was empty and really good quality road. So, not a problem from a safety point of view. So I got stopped by the police. And this policeman said, you were doing double the speed limit. So I was like, and in the back of my mind, I could remember when we picked up the hire vehicle, they said, if you get any fines or anything like that, there is a penalty and you have to pay for administration and blah, blah, blah. So I'm starting to think this could be quite expensive. So I said to the policeman, do we have to make this official?
Right.
And he said to me, sir, that would be feeding the beast called corruption. So I said, okay, how much is it? And I think it was something like £1.
Yeah.
And then on your way. But in situations like that sometimes, and credit to the guy for doing the right thing, a more entrepreneurial person, inverted commas, he might have been tempted to say yes.
Right. So creative way around this.
Yeah. So how do you, at the one hand, inspire the creation and all the positive things around entrepreneurship, but then on the other side, control how it could go somewhere that's not so good?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other aspect is that aspect of how to, because it's often becomes about the entrepreneur themselves. And then they can become too big a figure in the organization, especially as it needs to scale potentially. So how to translate and transfer, that, and disperse across a collective instead of it being about the individual, and one sometimes, can wonder about these things with people like Elon Musk and so on, where it's just, it's all about the person and the ego and the individual, and less about the collective that's actually enabling all of that to happen.
Yeah, and I won't remember the statistics, but there's something about a tiny percentage of businesses that scale from, I think it's something like more than £1 million to, a higher level. So basically what this research is saying is that most small companies, and it's something like 90%, I think, remain small companies.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. So, and I think maybe it's a lot to do with what you described, that the people are great at kind of setting the thing up, but then don't have, it's the ego thing, isn't it? They don't have the ability to let go, enable the thing to really grow. Yeah, I remember seeing the stat and thinking, goodness me, that is so. But then, so what about in the corporate world? I'm just, who in the corporate world, because this is the other way around again. So what we've just touched on is entrepreneurs not being able to think like the corporate in order to scale. Earlier, you mentioned this, that corporates are really encouraging their people to have more of an entrepreneurial approach. So which organizations come to mind when you think about larger organizations still being able to maintain that more entrepreneurial approach? Not the banks, for sure.
No, not the banks, not the banks. So so who else could we look at as examples of other organizations?
I'm thinking back to my hospitality days. Marriott have a portfolio of brands, and so they have anything from timeshare properties to luxury 5-star hotel properties to smaller boutique properties. And I think they're an example of a company that doesn't seem to rest on its laurels and just keep doing the same thing over years. It's constantly introducing new brands into their portfolio. So that's one that comes to mind for me. I guess Uber, although they've received some really bad press over the years, that surely is an example of entrepreneurship almost in the extreme, because the drivers are all running their own business rather than employed.
Yeah.
So maybe it's a structured organization which allows its employees to be entrepreneurs. But again, it's that same dilemma, isn't it, that we were talking about earlier? How do you give people the freedom to do what they want, but within the structure that you lay down? Because if everybody's doing their own thing, you're no longer a consistent brand.
That's it. So there's something about thinking like an entrepreneur, maybe, but still within the structures of the wide. And then this is where perhaps the collective values of the organization maybe act as some kind of a way of bringing that to bear. So you still in the organization are part of that and still part of something that is held in common. There are things that matter to us as a collective, and we stay in alignment with those.
Yeah, I find that whole area fascinating, actually. And because just now I mentioned hospitality, I'm thinking back to 5-star properties and how I just remember, there was one place I worked in where I had all of the bartenders. They had the logo of the property on cufflinks as part of their uniform standard. Now, more recently, you read so much about people, employers, saying we want the person to bring their whole self to work.
Yes. Yeah.
And I'm thinking, oh, this must be a nightmare, because, you know, if somebody wants pink hair in a 5-star hotel setting, when you've got a brand standard to maintain, how do you put those two things together and end up not confusing yourself completely?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think Virgin's doing that, aren't they?
Yeah, so they
Thinking of
seem
Richard
to have a
Branson.
really progressive approach to inclusion, don't they?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But
And I
then,
think that connects with their customers, you know,
yeah,
to be honest, the individuality again, getting to something.
yeah.
Yeah.
And again, maybe the key then there is that it's totally aligned with the way they position their brand.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whereas an
Yes.
organization that was more about consistency
Mm.
wouldn't sit as well with its customer,
Mm.
because it's two different messages, right?
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
So I'm conscious of time, and so we always ask the same question at the end of a values jam, which is this. So what are you encouraged to do differently about entrepreneurship as a result of our conversation?
Yeah. So I suppose, yes, I have an entrepreneurial role in a way in my business, and certainly since I took over, it wasn't a business I started though. So, you know, but it is a small business, and I took it over from the founder. And so, you know, what's been interesting is actually that process of reviewing and understanding and questioning everything, you know, a lot of what the way things were, to see, you know, what are better ways of doing things, and what is the next phase needed of development in this business. So I'm bringing to mind our image that we crafted, and there's something about, you know, that image that, you know, is strengthening and experiencing the liberation. Sometimes it can feel a little, you know, heavy and with all the responsibility of being, you know, the business owner and so on. And so there's something about using that image actually as an energizing kind of thing to bring to my day to day, to really sort of appreciate the more liberating and fun parts of being an entrepreneur, rather than perhaps the more weighing down bits. So yeah, so I think just a little bit of a reminder of keeping that image in mind as an inspiration to.
That's a great suggestion, and I think, yeah, it's true, isn't it, that when you've got the responsibility and you're striving to grow a business, there's a natural tendency perhaps to be focused on the hard work bit and, you know, the nitty-gritty, and to forget actually that we're really privileged to be in this position where you haven't got, you know, you're not going to be walking into an appraisal with somebody that you don't particularly get on with in 2 months' time. We're not bound by loads of regulations in running our businesses, and we can kind of make choices about commercial models and service delivery methods and people and all of that sort of stuff. So yeah, you've certainly reminded me of how fortunate I am doing what I'm doing. I think what am I encouraged to do differently? I'm thinking about this scaling thing actually. So, and two parts of it. One, that piece about how small companies find it a challenge to really scale. And then the other bit is the Uber thing, you know, how they manage to grow so quickly in a relatively short period of time. And I'm gonna block off some time just to think about that for Values Jam, actually. And one of the not dream, because dreams are not true, so it's an aspiration or an ambition, I guess. I would love a large corporate organization to say, because we're working remotely now and people are not together as often as they used to be, we are finding that relationships aren't as strong as they used to be. And that's kind of understandable. So what we're going to do is put a supply of ValuesJam card decks in every office in the world. And we're going to run a program where we expect every employee to have a ValuesJam with a colleague somewhere in the world every fortnight or however often it is, with a view to us building those relationships and bonds. Now, I haven't found the large company yet, but that's where I'm going to put more effort, I think, because this conversation has reminded me that that's a compelling proposition for an organization. So I need to find a way to get that message to the right people.
Great.
All right. So to finish, Liz, could we just describe our character that we've been playing with over this last 40 minutes? So go on, you do the first, and then if there's anything to add, then I will. But go on, what's our picture?
Yeah. So the person standing really tall, up above the sort of heads of everyone else, standing really tall, with this great view across, into the distance. So really being able to see, so arms out across the breadth of things, and this big heart at the center. Symbolizing the sort of courage and connection with a customer, and a need to be solved, to be met. And then, but feet firmly down, all the way down to the ground, planted on the earth, really connected with a groundedness of reality as it is. Yeah.
Right, that sounds great. I've got one thing to add. You do your scanning exercise.
Body scan, yeah.
So I'm imagining a never-ending body scan from the ground that are, that are so firmly planted, all the way up through the body to the top of the head, and then back down again, so that our entrepreneur has constantly got this sense of everything everywhere, rather than being in one place.
Oh, love it. Great.
All right, Liz, so that's it. ValuesJam done. Thank you so much for your time today.
That was fun. Thank you, Alan.
All right, cheers.
Cheers.